Welcome. My name is Dr. John H. Braccio, psychologist and educator, and I'm most satisfied that you've determined to listen to the latest Brown Bag CD program put together for you entitled Identify and Develop the Special Gifts and Talents of Your ADHD Child. This is actually part of a series of CDs and also DVDs that I have put together specifically in relation to ADHD. And for the third time on this series, I'll be including my son, who happens to have the same name I do, John Braccio, who at this particular time is working as a school psychologist in the Dade County Schools in Miami, and has been for the past 5 years, and before that worked in a classroom for a few years. So he certainly is well experienced with ADHD. And in my particular case, I'm the Director of Regional Psychological Services and also the Diagnostic Center for Attention Deficit Disorders. And I've been really committed to ADHD for many, many years because I've certainly had many of these characteristics myself, and I can certainly identify with them and identify with persons that have these specific characteristics. And of course, when we think of ADHD, we tend to think of the three hallmarks, one of which is inattention, and also hyperactivity and impulsivity. In addition, is the combined. Now, this particular CD, if you want to contrast it, the other two brown bag CDs we put together, one is called Managing Behavior Problems in the Home, and the other is The Right Teacher in Classroom to Maximize the Potential of Your Child. And then there are two comprehensive CD DVD packages, one for children and one for adults. But this particular CD really relates to a lot of the positive aspects of ADHD. We kind of live in a world now where we use the word disorder, dysfunction, disability, and often we're really just talking about a variation, a different style. And the ADHD person often falls into the trap of, because there's difference and uniqueness, of often being seen in a negative, in a wrong, and a bad way. And that's really unfortunate. And that's part of what the purpose of this CD program is. It's really to talk about the particular traits that so often set the ADHD person apart from the other persons of the world, if you will. And that there are so many tremendous traits that go with ADHD. And often parents, persons like you, can be thinking negatively about your child because of problems at home, problems at school, problems in the community. Not that these don't have to be dealt with, because we all do have to learn to adapt to the world. But we need to be looking at the positive aspects of the characteristics of our child and make sure that we build on the strengths. So again, we're going to specifically be talking about traits, characteristics of the ADHD child, and how they're really positive and how we can build on them and see them in a good way. And your goal as a parent is to really try to develop the positive aspects of your child. And first, it's important to identify. Now, I'm going to be talking about many characteristics here. Some may relate to your child, and some may not, but many of them will. But let's talk about some of the key things here. Let's talk about the word enthusiastic. So often the person who has ADHD, and I might add in the world, often we will say ADD, talking about those with inattention, and ADHD with those with hyperactivity and impulsivity. For the purposes of this CD, we're just going to be using the word ADHD. We may use them interchangeably, but we're really talking about persons that have one or more of the three characteristics, the inattention, impulsivity, hyperactivity. But enthusiastic, oh my. I've known so many ADHD children that have just such great enthusiasm. They really are enthusiastic. They sometimes overwhelm everyone around them with this enthusiasm. So it's important that we, as parents, and educators need to deal with this, and community people need to find ways to channel this enthusiasm in really a positive way. And John, let me ask you, in your diagnosis and your work with ADHD students, This enthusiasm, do you see much of this?
Yeah, no, I definitely see this. I think even overexcited over sometimes something that may seem just kind of minor to someone else, overexcited, overenthusiastic, sometimes it can be misinterpreted as aggression when they're playing, out on the playground with sports. They get excited about playing basketball or football, and maybe it'll tackle someone and it's seen as too aggressive, too violent, and so on.
And I think what you have to do as a parent, what we have to do as parents, is just make sure that this enthusiasm is under control, that it's channeled, that it's harnessed. And we actually help and model and coach our children on how to behave and let them know there's nothing wrong with being enthusiastic. In fact, it's a marvelous trait, but there is a great need to be able to control it. Let's take another. Energetic. Oh my, this is very closely related to the enthusiastic. But ADHD children often have an intense focus on their own interest and goals. This, unfortunately, gets them in problems because teachers, parents, and others will say, well, if that kid can spend 5 hours making this model airplane, or spend 4 hours at the computer, or read 5 books today on something they're interested in, they must just not be trying. Well, that isn't true. That really is not true. This high energy level is often not easy to focus on something in particular. It often is focused on things that they're interested in. So it's important to let them know how wonderful the work they do, how good it is, how important it is. But there's always the need to try to help channel them to do things more that have to be done in the classroom or in the home. Now, John, when you talk to teachers, you talk to parents, and you run into some of these kids that have great energy and they really can have even great academic achievement, but it's very diffuse or it's not in enough areas to really be doing well in school. How do you really talk to the parent and the teacher, whoever, let's just say specifically parents, about what they might be able to do to help the child be able to focus more on other aspects of school they're not doing without destroying their enthusiasm and the focus they do have on things they're interested in?
Well, that's a frustration that I see in a lot of parents, and I think you were kind of touching upon it with the computers or the model airplane. What I see a lot is the video games, where some of these kids they can't concentrate for more than 2 seconds on reading or doing something in school that's academic, school related, but they can sit in front of these computer and video games for 7 hours on end because they like the stimulation that they get from the video games. So there has to be a way that, and I think you've been kind of touching upon the focusing and harnessing this enthusiasm, this energy in a positive way. So I think it's important that there be some sort of stimulation that they get also from the academic level. You don't want too much stimulation either, because you don't want too many pictures, too many things around for the distraction. But there has to be a way to be able to focus and harness in all of that energy in a positive way rather than the negative way, which is a lot of times what we're having the problems in school or at home or wherever.
Sure. And John, another one is the sense of humor. If there's one thing a lot of ADHD kids have, it is really a sense of humor. Unfortunately, this is often, again, can be a problem area by being very quick-witted, being very spontaneous, being able to just make little comments, see similarities, double meanings in words, and just being quick. So this sense of humor, as wonderful it is, it can make you the hit of the team, hit of the party, hit of the people, but it can certainly cause you a lot of issues with people that might be sensitive to what you're saying, and certainly in the classroom where a teacher is trying to be doing the job. So this is one of those areas, but that can cause problems. And not because having a sense of humor is not an astounding gift, but it is another one of these things that somehow needs to be harnessed and channeled, and the child has to be told, bite your lip if the teacher says something that they've misspoken, if they've used the wrong country or the wrong whatever statement, wrong verb. It's not your job to start chuckling, Mrs. Jones has made a mistake today. No, we don't do things like that. So it's important that the child really learn how to do this.
Yeah, I think that's an important self-control with the controlling the impulsivity that so many of these children have. You tell them, I mean, you can tell them, and they may even consciously be thinking that, all right, I need to bite my lip because the teacher just did or said something silly. But it's so difficult. You just can't keep it in, and it gives kind of a release and there needs to be a release in a different way, in a different manner.
And I mentioned, just touched before, the spontaneous. These kids are often very, very spontaneous. This is another great skill. You could say, hey, let's go to the zoo, or let's go to Detroit, or let's go to a game, and the kid, yes, ready to go. Of course, they may have 50 other ideas when you'd rather be maybe relaxing or sitting home. But we build on this spontaneity, this willingness, this desire to keep trying to do things. That's a very critical, very, very important thing to be doing, being spontaneous. But it's another one of those things that you have to control it, have to learn how to back off, count to 10, just sit back and work on it. This is a very hard thing to do. And sometimes medication can help, even though we're not specifically talking about medication. But sometimes something like a Wellbutrin, Strattera, which would be non-stimulants, or things like Concerta, things like Adderall, things like Ritalin can be helpful. But again, our focus here is more to spot areas of strength that we can work on rather than necessarily trying to medicate an issue. Okay, another thing is spotting details others miss. Because persons with ADHD actually pay attention to so many things, so really it's a misnomer, the statement, the inattention, because the problem is they cannot always attend to a specific thing, but they can attend to many things. And often in things they're interested in, they can find details that others cannot find. And this also often happens in just looking at things. They can just see things. I know there's a test that we use on the Wechsler Intelligence Scales where they have to identify missing parts. And I've always been amazed how a lot of times the ADHD child, if the child is interested, how they often can just spot these missing pieces, things that others just really don't see. Another trait is thinking in innovative ways and approaches to doing things. Being creative, part of the creativity. Being imaginative. All these run together. And boy, are these great areas of strength. We always think of Thomas Edison as one example of somebody who could do so many things, a Da Vinci who could work on 1,000 things, okay, not necessarily finish everything, but could do all kinds of different things. But being innovative, and there's a need for teachers, parents to recognize this creativity, this imagination, this innovative way of doing things in a world where we're trying to homogenize everybody into doing things a very specific way. Now, John, you're often involved in the schools, like all the time. How do you talk to the parent who's saying, my child has all these skills? Let's say the child is this imaginative, but is driving the teacher crazy, coming in with a little spaceship that they're working on in the 5th grade, where everybody else might be just maybe making some drawings, or wants to find the 50 most difficult words in the English language and start using them in the class, and calling those that don't use them maybe not the best of ways, using this imagination to an extreme. How do you deal with something like that? How do you talk to the parent when you really want the kid to succeed in school?
Yeah, and this is a tough one with a lot of parents, because they're trying everything. They're trying very hard. They're very frustrated. The teacher's frustrated. A lot of times, even the child may be frustrated because they see that they're not passing because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they're supposed to be building a small model, just something small, but they're coming in with this big model airplane that's way more complicated than what the class may be doing. Just the fact that he's doing something he's not supposed to be doing, he's not going to be passing the class. So I think it's important to be able to, this is one where you have to work with both the parents and the teachers on this, and structuring the child's life so that they start understanding that they have to be paying attention to the specific instructions. Because they may see the instructions, but then they'll be sidetracked by 1,000 other things that they may be wanting to do. So they may be doing 1,000 things without getting anything one day. And you kind of alluded to that with the Da Vinci example and some of these other people. They have 1,000 things going on, and it's important to be able to start training the child to be able to focus on the one thing, the one instruction that's specifically being asked of them.
And I think as a parent, we don't get angry at the child for being creative, innovative, imaginative. No. We have to let them know how wonderful it is, but we try to help them use these astounding gifts and skills that they have because of their ADHD characteristics in a way that helps them succeed more in the school setting and in life by focusing some of that in some areas that they just have to work with. That is unfortunately part of life. Now let's talk about the word brave, okay? One thing about ADHD children, they're generally brave. They're willing to try to do things. And remember this, there are, in the military, in fact very closely related to this of course would be risk-taking, and the military is a niche career for persons with ADHD. So are certain sporting activities, so are police officers, so unfortunately are crooks sometimes. These can kind of go wrong ways, but being brave, being a risk-taker, being not afraid to try new things, this basically can be very, very positive. And if we can use these skills for the risk-takers, brave people, to do things and try to be in leadership roles when others might be, we'll say, more fearful, that is a key thing. And as parents, if we have a child who is brave, a risk-taker, we'll even use the word resourceful, this is something, that skills that we want to build on as parents. Now, John, do you find many of the leaders in the classroom, even if they drive the teacher sometimes mad a little bit, that they're often the ADHD and often the real leaders?
And I would definitely say that, because they're more the take charge. They're not as standoffish. And I'll use an athletic example. A lot of times in situations where in an athletic event, people may be afraid to take the big shot, afraid to make a big move in a pressure type situation, but they're not afraid. And I think a lot the other kids the peers respect that, because a lot of times that they're afraid to do what they want to be doing. They want to be the one taking the big shot at the end, being the star, but they're more standoffish, and they don't have they're not as decisive in the big moment, because they may not be as impulsive or spontaneous. I mean, then
Sure.
it may be as simple as that. They're more back off, waiting for something to happen. Where these kids, a lot of times, they make something happen, and that's good. I mean, that can be good in a lot of different areas.
Well, being impulsive doesn't have to be bad. It's sometimes in that moment when something has to be done, if you're impulsive, that can be a very positive trait. Again, it needs to be worked in a way that it works to the advantage of everyone. And also this leads to people being helpful, because if you are brave and if you're willing to do things, try things, you're resourceful, you're a risk taker, this also can be helpful to people that really are not ready to do that but are looking to some leadership. So that leads to this kind of this disjoint, if you will, that the parent has someone who they hear these negative things about the child, but the child's such a leader. In fact, we know someone like that very specifically. In fact, probably a few that we know over the years. I'm talking to my son John about some people that we have known that are clear leaders, but they've never really been the type that could conform or do as well as they really could in life. And there are many, and in fact they're everywhere. We probably know them all around us. And those that do conform within reason and still get ahead tend to often become the CEOs of corporations. They tend to be leading figures in the schools and the community. So being able to rein in the risk-taking, the being brave, the resourceful, being helpful, all these things can be tremendous gifts that so many ADHD children have. So as parents, we want to mold this in a positive way. And this, of course, gets into another one about being charming. Oh my. If there's one area that I have seen so many times, I'm sure you have, John, also, it is this charming characteristic of the ADHD person, because they are so quick with their mind. That's why sometimes they join 2-3 conversations at the same time. They will start talking to you about something that they've been thinking about but haven't been talking to you about, and you'll say, now where's that coming from? And because they have this remarkable ability, it's almost an intuitive ability to often read people, and unfortunately it can go the other way too, because they are so, we'll call it impulsive, that they can't read people well. But one of the great gifts of the ADHD child is not only be charming, but often can just read people because they're so quick at, like a fast computer, reading how people see them, how they react. So they can be very, very charming. They can be magnetic because of this energy level that they have that others do not have. Now, this leads, of course, to something else, often well-spoken. These are often golden-tongued. How does that sound? The golden-tongued, charming person. So this is an important thing to keep in mind, too. So if you have one of these golden-tongued, charming, clever, brave, call it what you will, little impulsive, you just want to see those as gifts, but find a way to channel them in the right way lest they really become frustrated, develop low self-esteem, become angry, and some of the negative things that really come when you're constantly being put down in life. I might add, many of these kids are quite sensitive, and if you're sensitive, then you can feel shameful, you can feel that you're shamed, you can have poor self-esteem, you can become angry, you can become defensive if people seem to be always putting you down. Now, have you seen much of this, John? Some of these, the really sensitive kids, and because they just are having trouble conforming, even though they have these enormous skill sets, because they're ADHD, that they're really kind of hurting and feeling shameful.
Yeah, I definitely see that, and those are the ones that I worry about a lot because they kind of get a learned helplessness where they come to expect to not succeed, to not be able to do things right, to not be able to focus on the one or two things that they need to be focusing on. So they struggle, and they keep struggling through school with they struggle socially, academically. Their parents are upset, so they kind of have a feeling that everyone is angry and upset with them.
Sure. I might add, many of these kids are so loving, so caring, so warm. They're just people. They really want to get along with people. Oftentimes they're pleasers. They really want to get along, and that's why it can be very painful when they're always being put down for doing things the wrong way. So I think it's important to really take into account the personality of these kids and really try to be very sensitive to them. Now, another thing, and this relates to what we were talking about before, open to new things. Willing to try new things, being open. This is often why they're very successful on eBay businesses, on opening businesses, in sales, in developing products, because they're open. They don't just see things in a certain way. They don't just see always going 1 to 10. They might say, hey, we can go to 10, we can go to 8, then we can maybe sneak into 11, we can do 12, whatever it might be. So they're open to new things. They also multitask. They can do many projects at once. Now, of course, this can be a negative because you've got to be able to complete things. But, on the other hand, these are persons that can get a lot of things done. And if you're in a school setting or in an environment where things just come up and 4 or 5 things need to be done, boy, it's great when you've got someone who doesn't get utterly stuck on one thing, and they can move from one thing to another. So multitasking, when controlled, is a great gift that most people really don't have. Okay, also eager to meet new people, just love it, love meeting new people, and often are seen as more fun than others. People like to be with them, new people meet them. So you've really got these these amazing qualities with these kids. And also, another great quality is often a great memory. A person will say, well, how do they remember all that? Now, a lot of it may be random, but because they're looking and noticing so many things, they're often picking up vast amounts of information. You may be talking to one kid, and he knows all about Roman history, knows about Spanish history, knows about American history, knows about all kinds of things, because they're interested in a lot of things. The problem, of course, has been that they can't really focus enough on things they really have to do. But again, let's take a look at the memory, the multitasking, wanting to meet new people, being fun. A lot of these are just very good, characteristics. They're intuitive with people. These are just wonderful things. They're good at problem solving because they've have these characteristics that are so unique that they don't just look at things one way. They're like an Einstein. they're like a great inventor. They're like a great painter, an innovative person. They just look at things differently, and they look at things 1,000 different ways. It's like their computer is just going in a big circle at high speed. It's kind of like when you have, like in our area now, Comcast is really a very, very fast computer connection versus the old dial-up. Well, these are clearly Comcast times 10 versus the old dial-up computer, which many people really have when they're going on the internet. So that makes these folks also great. They're great brain. They can just storm things. That you give them an idea, something to storm an idea, and there they go, and they're good in emergency situations. They're just people that have some tremendous qualities. They can also make sense of chaos. They're often seen as chaotic. Is that not right?
Yes.
They're seen as chaotic.
So they're more comfortable with it.
Well, believe it or not, I mean, they are. It's why in emergencies, in the sense of chaos, when everything seems up in the air, to them it just seems normal. They may often be going 10 times the normal speed of thought, if you will. And so when chaos comes, there they are. Now, what have you seen, John, in terms of in life and students that can be helpful to parents just about this making sense of chaos? Specifically, how do you see them doing? How do they deal with this chaos? Like, if a person is, let's just say, in a classroom, teacher's having a hard time, there may be a kid who's really causing a problem, nobody really knows what to do. Why is it that the ADHD child often can even stop a problem?
You've hit on a lot of different things about paying attention to the details that others may not be as focused on. If there's an issue going on, they're able to see so many different, see it from so many different perspectives because they're always looking at it. They're not always looking at it simply maybe as someone else may be looking at it. It's more complex with what's going on. So they're able to kind of unravel what may be going on in a different way and look at so many things from so many different ways, from some of the skills that they've developed that a lot of people haven't necessarily seen them developing.
I just know that when I talk to parents, I'm amazed at what they'll tell me. We'll call him Chucky, okay? Chucky, who maybe is always pushing the envelope, going always the furthest, but if the parent is really having some problems and having a bad day, Chucky all of a sudden can see through it and say, look, Mom, this is what the issue is. This is what we have to do to solve this thing. I can help. And this is what I mean about this chaos, this kind of this ability in the midst of chaos. They're doing well because that's what they're like. And do remember, a lot of times to the ADHD child, it's kind of like if you were in a room with a symphony blaring all around you. This is an example I often use. To them, that's normal. And they can hear the piccolo, they can hear this, the trombone, where it would just be chaos. We would just be hearing, my goodness, all kinds of sounds blaring. And that's, again, can be normal to them. Oh, well, doesn't everybody do it this way?
And I think with the example I gave, to going back to the athletic example, just, I played football in high school. In high school, and when you're playing football in the trenches, there's so much chaos. There's so much activity, there's so much going on around them that I've seen so many of these kids that in the classroom that are so chaotic, and then in that type of environment where so much of it relies on instincts, they're able to sift through all the chaos and feel at ease and feel comfortable with all of the intensity and all of the action going on around them.
Well, I think this kind of ties into this computer type analogy I was making. ADHD persons often have this amazing ability to just think so quickly, and it's like intuitive. You're right, we see it clearest on the athletic field, but we can also see it with the Einsteins of the world, with the Edisons of the world, with the people that are just able to somehow look at things that to everyone else is totally chaotic and go, aha, I can see what that is. But I do think the athletic example is a very good one, because we can see that more readily, just instinct. The defensive back in football is an example that just somehow, almost intuitively, gets a feeling where the ball is, and they just instinctively know what to do, and they just do it very quickly. And this, of course, is seen, as we were talking about, the quick-witted, the quick thinking, which sometimes, of course, gets you in trouble if you speak before you think. I remember Golly saying many times to students, and even with the parents sitting there, remember to engage mind before engaging tongue. Everyone kind of laughs, so it's kind of a a difficult concept for parents sometimes to really realize that these are astounding gifts and skill sets that the ADHD child has that others really don't have. And see, being able to dream big, this is another one. We talked about this earlier, but being a visionary, being imaginative, intuitive, resourceful, being able to dream big, oh my, this is really important, and so many people aren't this way at all. I know in the years I taught at Michigan State University, I knew many professors, really wonderful people, and some exceptionally bright, but it wasn't at the intuitive level. It wasn't at the visionary level. It wasn't at the highly imaginative level. It was at a technical level. But that's not where I have found what I would call the most intuitive people, the most resourceful, the most imaginative. I find them often in the marketplace. I find them out in the world. They're selling things, they're developing things, building things. Not that they're not in universities, but don't just think because someone has a doctor before their name or a specialist in psychology like my son John does here, that all of a sudden those are the most intuitive, those are the most imaginative. No. Those are skills that people have. They can develop them, but they're part of this ADHD skill set, and they're just wonderful, wonderful skills. And I mention this to you because I think it's critical that as parents that you see these unnatural, these exceptional gifts as really important. Because one of the problems I think we have in the world now is too often the ADHD person is seen in a negative way. We really don't have emotional diversity, if you will, using words of the present day, emotional diversity in our schools, or in the world actually. We still want people to conform, be a certain way. And I'm certainly you're aware of the book from years ago that talks about the farmers and talks about the hunters, and that the hunters clearly are the ADHD people, and the farmers would clearly be the rest of the world. And we certainly need farmers, but we certainly need hunters. So I think if you're a hunter in a world everybody wants you to behave sedentary, sitting down, just studying, doing things in a certain way, we'll make it more in the farming mode, even though it's probably not a fair analogy, but at least it's one I think we can put a handle on. You can see how we're in a world that if you're really active and you're wanting to move all the time and you're quick-witted and you want to do 100 things, and you're in a world where rows are set in a certain way and bells go off when you're to leave and bells go off when you're to study, and during periods you're supposed to be just sitting there and reading, even if you don't like what you're reading. You can see why this is very, very difficult for the ADHD child, and why there are so many issues in the school. And then we come out and use the medical model and come up with negative words like disorder, disability, a syndrome, call it whatever you will. So you have to really see this as positive. And while teaching the child to conform, as a parent, you want to be building a powerful self-esteem. And I know, John, we've talked about this various times, that teachers often have problems seeing this innovation that these kids have. And it's tough when you're trying to run a regular classroom. But often we've talked about how parents also have been just kind of beaten down and just feel defeated and don't see the positive. Now, when you're talking to parents and you want to build their own self-esteem in relation to the children by letting them be aware of the great traits their children do have that have ADHD, what do you say that can help them feel better and help them be more effective parents?
I think a lot of times parents do recognize that if you talk to them about some of the skill sets that you've discussed, they're aware that they're there, but they're still used to seeing the negative, because that's all. A lot of times that may be all they hear from the teachers, from other parents in the school, from administrators, that being able to tell the parents, hey, your child has this skill, these types of skills, and they may be very creative, they may be very innovative, and just to help parents set goals for their children that the children can relate to and that they can achieve, I think can go a long ways in helping the self-esteem of these children. Because if they're able to accomplish a lot, and you can see they're able to accomplish a lot, it's important that you can be able to develop certain goals that they can reach for, that they can aim for, that they can achieve to help in the area of the self-esteem.
And I really do believe strongly that as parents, we need to be focusing on positive words and positive thoughts when we're dealing with our children, particularly our special and positive way ADHD children. We don't want to be using the negative words, destructive, annoying, ozone layer, whatever negative words that are used, or syndromes, disabilities, call them whatever you will. We want to be focusing on the good words: enthusiastic, energetic, sensitive, visionary, imaginative, intuitive, resourceful, unconventional, versatile, unorthodox, in a positive way. This is a very important thing to do. Now, if the child is having problems with reading, is having trouble with math, is having problems with behavioral problems, those are issues that have to be dealt with. But I'm talking here specifically about high-quality abilities, top-notch abilities and gifts, if you will, that have been given to the ADHD child. And as the parent, we want to identify them, and we want to help develop these special gifts by building on them to help the children. So that has been the purpose here. Now, I'm going to just quickly go through all the areas that we have talked about. And remember, the title of this particular brown bag CD is Identify and Develop the Special Gifts and Talents of Your ADHD Child. And these are the skill sets, the skills. Not every child has, not every ADHD child has, because everyone is different, of course. But numbers of these particular skills fit into the skill sets of the ADHD child and make these children so exciting, so dynamic, so overall successful often in life. And many are not successful because they've really clearly been underdiagnosed over the years. And in the adult age, oh my, it's hard to imagine how many have not been identified. I know in my work, and I might add began my career in 1966 as a classroom teacher, and since 1978 I've been working full-time in the private sector as a clinical psychologist. And I'd say 10, 15 years ago, I every now and then did an adult ADHD. I now do at least half or more of the evaluations that I do would be with adults. And I'm sure many of you listening to this particular CD have these characteristics, particularly if you have a child that has these characteristics. So in your case, if you keep saying, well, that's me too, you might really consider an evaluation to determine if you do have ADHD. And even if you don't have enough of the characteristics to meet it, you could have many of the characteristics, and of course that could lead to you being helped by you being aware of the strengths that you really have and start building on them, and don't let those things hold you back and feel bad. So anyway, positive, clearly look at these characteristics, see if they're in your children, and really try to develop them in them as special gifts to help them really be successful. Okay. Enthusiastic, energetic, they can have intense focus on interest and goals, sense of humor, spontaneous, spot details other miss, can think innovatively, can have unique approaches to doing things, creative, imaginative, brave, impulsive in a good way, charming, can have the magnetic personality due to the energy level. Might add, don't sleep that much either, even have more time to get things done. Loving and warm, caring, sensitive, want to build on this, not have shame, not have low self-esteem showing, often well-spoken, often golden-tongued, if you will, be helpful, risk-takers in a positive way, open to new things, multitasking. They can do many projects at the same time, often great memory, even if it's often random, but they're often great conversationalists because they pick up so much data in their life, eager to meet new people. They're often more fun than others. They can make sense out of chaos. Oh my, comfortable with change and chaos. Often intuitive with people. Great at problem solving. Great brainstormers. Good in emergency situations. Not afraid to act when necessary, part of the impulsive. Quick thinking and quick-witted. They dream big. They're visionaries often, great imagination, intuitive, resourceful, unconventional, versatile, unorthodox, and often very hard workers. Now, if your children meet even some of these, and I'm sure they do, and maybe most of them, these are great skills. These are unique things. And you need to be proud of those, and you need to develop them. And obviously, they have to learn to conform, and you have to be their coach. You have to help them. And all the reading, all the things you can do to learn more and more about ADHD, and also how to let them feel good. And if you have some of these traits, how to feel good, better about yourself. And build on these traits. And educate teachers, educate community, educate family about ADHD and about the characteristics and how these can be wonderful, wonderful gifts that most people don't have. So before I do a final wrap-up, John, do you have any comments or anything?
I just think that as someone who works with a lot of these kids, that it bothers me a lot of times that a lot of these traits are overlooked in these kids because they want to focus too much on the conformity in the schools. I just think it's very important that parents who are here listening to this right now, that they see a lot of these traits and characteristics that we discuss as positive traits, rather than just focus on the negatives that may be coming from other parents, from other teachers, from other people in the community who work with your child.
Excellent. That's very true, John. So again, I'm just very happy you've been willing to listen to this CD. I hope it's very helpful. Any comments, any suggestions you have would always be appreciated. The 800 phone number is 233-0766. The website is drjohnb.com. And also Braccio, PhD, Braccio, PhD. You can get there either way. You can email us there if you have any ideas or suggestions. You can also check out other brown bag CDs and other programs that we have together in relation to ADHD and other topics. But any suggestions and ideas are always appreciated. The goal is always to try to do the best that we can to be helpful. And I have a lot of these traits. John has a lot of these traits, and many persons have many of these traits. Many people have suffered for many, many years, and millions of children right now do suffer. And being different is something that is not always easy. But if we can build on the great traits and great gifts, if you will, and talents, just the special gifts and talents that come with ADHD, and try to see the positive aspects and not just the negative in a world where the medical model of just looking for syndromes, disabilities, disorders, then we're going to be better off. And again, the topic of this particular CD brown bag program is identify and develop the special gifts and talents of your ADHD child. And again, this is Dr. John Braccio with my son John Braccio, kind of signing off on this one, if you will, and hoping it's really helpful to you, and God bless.